of want to talk to you about this afternoon is something that I believe is going to become a bigger issue every time we develop this market. And the issue is multifunctional buildings, the buildings that have got apartments at the top. And then, for example, there's an office. So we've got an apartment and a hotel and an office. And this obviously presents some challenges for the elevatoring, because what's going to end up happening is the thing starts to look like a Swiss cheese, because everybody wants their own set of elevators. And talk about efficiency problems. This is an efficiency problem and a sustainability problem for the building, period. And this is not the only difficulty. Another thing we're seeing a lot these days is very, very high apartment, but perhaps an 80-story apartment building in a city, luxury apartments. Well, you're selling luxury apartments, you for sure are not going to have all these elevators taking away all your space, so you're going to do that. And when you do that, the person that's bought the $100 million apartment comes out one day, pushes the button, and waits 5 minutes for an elevator. Doesn't matter where the elevators come from. If they're both heading down when he came out of his apartment, he's got problems. So these are whole issues that modern-day application of buildings cause to happen. And the solution that we're putting forward to the industry is what we call transit management. Transit management is the optimization of the complete journey through the building, not just one ride in one elevator, but a complete journey. It looks at access when you come into the building, the transportation, however many systems that may be, and there may be three, a sky lobby, another elevator, escalators, and it looks finally at guidance, because the one thing I think we've even seen so far today with the presentations is how complex these buildings potentially can be, and when they're complex, naturally, the joy of going through them can be somewhat squashed if you can't find your way. Schindler's implementation of transit management, we call it the port technology. I think a lot of people in the room have seen it before, so I'm going to flick through it really quickly. As Johannes mentioned earlier, it's destination control. This is the third generation of destination control. It's based on something that we call the port. This is a port. It's the Personal Occupant Requirements Terminal. And that terminal is essentially designed to let everyone communicate in a very sophisticated manner exactly where they need to go, what they're trying to achieve as they move through the building. To let them do that, we've got a touch screen, we've got a microphone, there's of course a card reader, there's a people detector, because again, we don't want this thing on when no one's using it. We've got naturally a microprocessor. And if I turn it around, you can see on the back we've got a speaker. So the whole goal of this system is to let people have a conversation, to tell the elevator system or the transit management system, where am I and where do I want to go? And let the system figure that out. So that's the port. Where does it go? It can go on a wall, for example. If there isn't a wall handy, it can go on a pillar. And the idea is this can really go anywhere in the building. It doesn't have to be near an elevator system. Anywhere where it can help. Maybe it's opening a door. Maybe it's just giving some guidance. Whatever makes sense, the port can be used to achieve it. It doesn't have to be just a vertical thing. We can flip this over and use it horizontally. When we do, it solves a big problem for us, the barrier. These barriers get very complicated. So many people get involved, security companies, access, the barrier company themselves, the lift company. What we do is we take the 3 wires that are available pretty much from any barrier manufacturer, and we interface to them. These are the wires that tell you your proximity and actually open and shut the barrier. So you add a port at each end of the barrier, and you've got an access control system linked to the elevator system that also does the barrier operation. And you have a port at one end, you show your card, the other end you're going to get the lift assignment up there. And when you've got a lot of people to move, for example, at ICC in Hong Kong, we get 18,000 people a day, many of them from mass transit into that building. This is an enormously efficient way of doing it, because as they go through the barrier, they can then go directly to their elevator. We can use a keypad, of course, for operating our port. This is a one generic way of doing it, and if you have to be anywhere in the building, that's a good idea. If you're a tenant and you have specific floors you're interested in, we can just show you those floors, so it's much easier. How do we do that? Well, you can show a card, for example. It knows who you are. It shows you the floors. We can get a bit more complex than that. For example, if you have just a certain number of floors in a building that you rent, say from floors 10 to 16, and I happen to be standing on floor 14, well, it's a good bet I want to go to either 10 to 13 or 15 and 16, and the system can allow me to do that. It can also, over a period of time, if I would like it to, actually learn where I like to go. During every time slot of the day, every port will learn that, and will pick up data so that by the end, I can offer you your most likely destination down to your least likely destination in that order. So that's port technology. And we started with one port. There's a lot of others coming on as we evolve this, as we find new specific issues and specific requirements for ports. We've developed different types, but they are all this same basic functionality. Find out what the customer wants and allow them to achieve it. And again, Johannes mentioned earlier on, we believe that cell phones are the future. We've already developed port apps for our cell phones, and obviously we were thrilled to see the iPhone 5 the other day, and I put that up there hoping that I'd be able to get one here before any of my colleagues back in Switzerland. Perhaps not. The key thing is, though, that this gives us another level of flexibility when we're moving through a building, and we see this as very important to the overall transit management strategy. Now let's look at a specific, and let's just take an example that addresses this problem we talked about earlier, this multifunctional building which has so many elevators to achieve what's required. And I'm going to simplify it a little bit because these things can get very complex and we don't have so much time. But let's just consider the office and the apartment solution. And we might have typically a layout like this. A couple of elevators for the apartments because, you know, this is my $100 million apartment. I certainly want exclusive travel to the top, and my office core right there. And of course, all the space in the office, an enormous amount of space in the office is being lost by that separate apartment core. What I'm going to suggest is that we do something like this, that we move the entrance to the apartment to be perhaps one level lower than the office entrance. So we extend up 3 of the office elevators into the apartment. What we can also do with the transit management system is to define one of the cabs, this one here, for example, and say that cab will still operate in the system as normal, but within 30 seconds it will be cleared of people and I can use it for something else. And I'll need that because we've got Andrea, and Andrea is a tenant in one of these very high-end apartments, and she expects exclusive service. So here she is, she's walking into the building. We don't know anything about her yet, but when she gets to the door, she'll use an access card on the port, and that will immediately alert this elevator to not take any more calls, come down to meet her. She gets assigned that elevator, her door is automatically unlocked. She's now going to have an exclusive ride up to her apartment as if that elevator was only for her, as if it was taking all that room in the building. What's so good about this, I can't stand it, is that by the time she gets to about there, that elevator is already back in the group because we know when it's going to deposit her at her floor. We can start reassigning calls from the office building to that elevator. So we only lost service to the office for a minuscule amount of time, but we gave that person exclusive service up to their apartment. And that is truly allowing a much greater efficiency in the building purely by design. And we're so nice, we'll even open her apartment door because we know we've deposited her and we have a port for that too. So I'm feeling pretty pleased with myself. This is great. You know, we've got all this good stuff going on. Unfortunately for me, there's an elephant in the room. And that elephant has a name. And the name of that elephant is quantifiable results. Because this is really a totally new way of looking at buildings that you've got to design. I can't just say, look, I'm a nice guy, I have a family to feed, go in this direction. You're going to say to me, yes, but give me facts. And for sure, I can give you empirical results. We've sold a lot of these systems around the world. And I can tell you stories and give you examples. But what we really need is the same level of data that we have today for a single elevator system. I think all the elevator manufacturers has done a very, very good job in taking a single bank of elevators and showing you exactly what the efficiency will be as you go through them. So I know I can get from one point in a building to another point, and I know exactly how long that's going to take me. The problem for that is the Concord Dilemma. Now, most people in the room I know are too young to even remember this now. But you remember the Concord Dilemma. Concord, fantastic aeroplane, able to get from London to New York in under 4 hours. That clunky 747 took nearly 8. 46% better. Well worth the 15% above first class fare you are going to pay to ride in it. But you still got to get to the airport. You still got to check in, go through immigration, go through security. You still got to get on that plane. You've still got to taxi out to the runway. You've got to taxi back in at JFK. You've got to get off the airplane. Then you've got to get your bag. Then you've got to get into the city. And that 46 has dropped to 26. And you know, that's an awful lot of money to pay to be there 26% earlier. It's a dilemma. And what this basically is telling us is if you want to understand really how well your building's going to work, you better know what people are doing in between their elevator rides, not just while they're on the elevator. And this is the critical thing about transit management. It addresses the whole journey. And that's why it is so vitally important that we develop a set of metrics as an industry that address this point. That's why what we're working on is a system that looks not just at one specific elevator journey, but every single person's journey through the building, and then integrates those all together. Now, this is a challenge for us because really the metrics here have not been developed. You know, we all love our destination time, our waiting time, our intervals, all this good stuff. But we've got to think of a whole new set of metrics for this. And I believe this is going to be a challenge that's going to absorb us in the next few years. But it's critical. If we're really going to get the sustainable buildings we want, and we're really going to get the efficiencies we want, we have to be able to design for them. If we have to be able to design for them, we've got to have the tools. So this is a critical point for the future. What's the coverage of this simulation? Well, initially we're saying it's a building. But, you know, we can't forget our earlier issues, that we've got perhaps an apartment that's only got 2 elevators that's sitting on the 80th floor full of apartments. And these are not things I made up. These are things that have come across my desk. And the reality is, in those situations, and they are becoming much more common as city living becomes a much more desirable thing, we believe we're going to have to totally change the paradigm of how you call an elevator, because it's not going to work. You can have the fastest elevators in the world. If those 2 elevators are heading away from you when you put the call in, you're going to wait 5 minutes, and you didn't pay $100 million to wait 5 minutes. So we have to totally change the paradigm of how we do this. And we believe that paradigm will now become a booking system, a much more personal experience inside the apartment for each tenant, who can actually tell the system what his objectives are, which means we might not necessarily be just looking in the building. We may be looking at the transit systems that serve that building, or in the limit, we may even be looking at the customer's final destination objective. These are the things that we have to take into account in the future, we believe, if those sorts of buildings are going to operate to the delight of our customers. Because right now, I tell you, we are heading off a cliff with this one. And we have to have a different approach. And we believe that port technology and transit management offers that. But I'm an optimist. You know, you can't come to Shanghai seeing the wonderful things that get achieved here without being an optimist. And I believe that we'll do it. And I believe that when we do, we will have really fantastic multifunctional buildings. And, you know, I'm certainly very happy that Schindler are playing such a role in doing it. Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed.